I went from being miserable and desperate to move out of my parents' house to getting an apartment with no rental history and subpar credit. And I did it in one of the biggest and most expensive cities in the world. Watch this video all the way through to see how I did it and why I think I had so much favor in this situation. If you're watching this video right now, you're probably in a tight living situation. Either the people you live with are driving you crazy, something unexpected happened, maybe your landlord said you have 30 days to move out, or you are just really trying to leave the nest and it's your first time and you don't know what to do or if it's ever going to really happen for you. Believe me, I was there. I was in the most dire situation, and things actually turned around for me within 30 days. So even though I knew I needed to get out and I was like crying out to God for a way out, this was really so unexpected and it happened very quickly. And I'm just so grateful. Every time I'm like in this apartment, I never ever forget just how good God is, and how he turned my situation around when I was least expecting it, and in such an abundant and powerful way. I want to explain to you guys why I even was in a position where I needed to move. The year was 2020 and I was 29 at the time, and I was just at my wit's end. I was outgrowing my parents' house, and at this time it was myself, my mother, my father, my older sister, and my two nephews. So needless to say, it was just a full house, and with a full house comes people and their personalities, their needs, their boundaries, or lack thereof, their stuff. And it really started to impact my mental health, if I'm being completely honest. I love my family, but we all reach a time where we really just outgrow a space that we're in. And this has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with what society tells us is the right time to move out. I promise you, if you're still living with your mom and dad, or at home or whatever, and if it's not impacting your mental health, then by all means, stay there. Save your money, save the headache of, like everything that comes with living on your own. You don't have to flex or prove anything to anybody. But for me, it was time. It was time to go, and my mental health was being impacted. On top of that, I had started to run a business, and operationally, my mom's house was just not the place to do it. I'm talking about like down to the bandwidth of the Wi-Fi. Things were just getting really critical. I would be on important Zoom calls and my nephew's coming in like, look what I can do. Y'all remember Stuart from Mad TV? If it wasn't that, it was my dad coming in to the room asking me if I wanted my sandwich cut regular or diagonally. Like, I'm grateful, but it was just a lot going on. It made it hard to even operate from a business standpoint. And if you guys are asking why didn't I just lock my door when I was doing business calls, I am Haitian. There will be none of that. Okay. When you are Haitian, it don't matter how old you are. It don't matter what bill you help pay. You're in your mom's house, you're in your dad's house. You are not locking doors. Just overall, it was so much deeper than just people coming in and out my room and whack Wi-Fi. I just reached a level where I knew that if I wanted to continue to be productive, to be creative, I needed my own space. So I also want to address what some of my big fears and doubts were. I was at a point where I had gotten so fed up and I was so serious about the next step that I actually started to look for apartments. This was the first time in all my years of saying, I gotta go, that I actually started to do research and do the footwork of seeing what it would look like to actually take that step. And a lot of my fears had to do with the fact that, like, I live in New York City, you guys. If you live in New York or you've heard of what goes down when it comes to real estate in New York, it's ridiculously overpriced here. We're talking about $2,000 for a studio apartment. And at that point, you got to choose between having a couch and a bed. You can't have both. I knew that I was going to be compromising and making sacrifices in some senses. And that was really scary to me because I had never been forced to delegate my income elsewhere. And to be quite honest with you, I was spending unnecessary money because I knew that I didn't really have any big responsibilities. So even though in my heart of hearts, I was like, I gotta go, actually taking those steps was a little bit scary. And I had doubts that I could really do this without having to, like, maybe one day come back home. And I just didn't really have a lot of the executive independent skills. Okay, so how did all of this come together for me? I have a friend who had spent the previous 2 years from 2018 to 2020 living in Spain. When she moved back to the United States, she was living in Pennsylvania with her mom and her brothers. But it was always known that she was eventually going to move into this very apartment, which is where her aunt and her uncle were living at the time. So they had told her, like, hey, listen, upon you coming back to the US, we're eventually going to move out of this space. And, this is a space that you could move into. So she knew that going into it. But at this time, it was August 2020. And they were talking about moving out towards spring of 2021. I wasn't thinking that I was going to be a part of those plans. We never discussed, like, oh, it's a 2-bedroom apartment. So by the time they're ready to move out, you can move in. We didn't talk about that, but we didn't not talk about it, if that makes sense. So, really, around October 2020, I was getting so just fed up and frustrated with the living situation. And that's when I really started to do some research and I started to set a budget for myself of how much I was willing to pay. And I believe at that time, I told myself I was willing to pay, 1700. That was my cutoff. I was not going to pay more than 1700 for a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment, which was all that I knew I was going to need at the time. I wasn't a mom yet. So that's where my head was at. In that same very month, I'm praying, I'm crying, I'm searching, and my friend sends me a message and she says that her aunt and her uncle are actually looking at property and they're looking to move before the end of the year. Right now it's October. Remember, they weren't supposed to move out until maybe May or June of the following year, but they started to look and saw something that they liked. So she said, they might actually be moving out within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Is that something that you are wanting to possibly partake in? If I move in, would you want to also move in as well? And I said, girl, yes, emphatically, absolutely. I immediately went, and I think we do this a lot. I immediately went to a place of like, ugh, like, it's too good to be true. Like, there's no way that I'm sitting here looking for apartments and thinking about all the stress of the paperwork and the credit checks and the security deposits. And I knew that this apartment was already a family heirloom and that the transition was going to be way more seamless. So when she told me this, I was just like, God, like, word, you looking out like that so soon? But then I went to the negative place of like, nah, like, watch this fall through. But she told me she was going to keep me posted and we were going to go from there. So in another couple of weeks, she said, like, yes, they found a property, they're ready to close, and they're going to be moving out by the end of November. So for us, it would be like a December 1st move in. Y'all, it was like the gates of heaven had opened up just for me. And I really just want to encourage anybody that's feeling like there's no signs of the situation getting better. There's no hope. There's no buoy. Is that the word? Buoy? While you're out here in open water, I promise you, God is working on something so powerful and so tailor made just for you. What you thought was going to be me sitting here thinking I was going to have to fend for myself and move into an apartment that was going to cost me close to $2,000. God was already working something out so powerful for me. So I just want to keep you guys encouraged. So all in all, everything actually did end up working out in our favor. We did have a December 1st move-in date. They actually moved out a couple of days before December 1st. And so we were able to transition right in. There was no hefty paperwork. They literally just took their names off the lease and added our names and passed us the key. They did not require us to pay a security deposit. It was none of that. It was just like, hey, y'all are family. Here's the key. Have a nice day. Have a nice life. And it's been a while since I've actually reflected on this. And I just remember feeling just so grateful. And it wasn't just because of the stuff. It wasn't just because of the physical space I was going to be able to have that would look very different than where I was living at the time. It was just a very clear time where I recall God hearing my cry. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Why do I think this all aligns so perfectly for me? And that's really the first thing that comes to mind. God heard my cry. Sometimes we think, like, is my prayer working? Or what's the point of even praying? And I promise you, your prayers are working. The answer might not always look like what you think it's going to look like, but God is hearing your cry. And I really was just no holds bar with him. Like, God, I need this. I need this. I need this. and he worked it out. Another thing that I feel like really allowed this to all fall in place for me was that while I was at my parents' house, I remained grateful. I did. I never was too good to still be grateful for having a place to sleep. My room in my parents' house was huge. I could work out in there. I had a desk in there and my closet was big and my parents were there. I got to be close to my parents. I was not cooking meals at that time. So I found little small pockets of things to be grateful for. And I really just avoided arguments and confrontation because when you get frustrated, you can become very short with people. So I made sure that I remained humble and I remained grounded as to not possibly forfeit my blessing because God understands that we want better. But if you are not grateful for the little bit that you currently have, it's going to be really hard for him to trust you with more. Always remaining grateful, I really do believe that helped to kind of catapult the situation for in my favor. The last thing I would say is that God gave me an assignment when I took on the role of becoming a business owner. God was speaking very clearly to me that, hey, you have an assignment, you have a calling on your life in a way that I didn't think I would have. You know, if you spoke to me in 2019, I didn't see business ownership in the cards for me. However, God gave me an assignment. I had goals and I had impact to make. And so I knew that by him giving me the keys to an apartment that was going to be shared, but still my own in a way, that was him saying, this is permission to keep going with that assignment and to go 10x now that you have the space, now that you have the mental clarity, now that you have the peace of mind. And I really believe that because he knew I was going to be intentional in this space and carry out and continue on that assignment, this is why he bestowed this apartment and imparted that blessing towards me. And the last thing I would say, I think I said that about the last thing, but this is really the last thing. I was doing my part. A lot of times we pray and we hope for an unsound miracle, and we are not doing our part in the carnal realm. You know, God can do supernatural things. He can do things that we are not expecting. However, we still have to do our part. We still have to take the first step, and he'll take 10. And so I think just me doing my due diligence and making sure that I was saving something, I was doing the searches for apartments, and I was doing all the things that I could in the physical realm. I think that was also proof to God that, like, oh, she's serious and she is actually willing to do things. She's not just being hyper spiritual, praying and hoping that things fall into place without doing her part. Something that I want to say to anybody that might be in a similar circumstance to where I was at circa end of 2020 before moving into this apartment is that you want to really do that gratitude exercise. The situation you're in right now might seem really dire, and it might actually be really dire. Let me correct myself. However, if there are small little moments or small little things that you could still be grateful for, do your best to bring those to the forefront and really focus on that as much as possible, because there are going to be elements of the situation that we really cannot control, timing being one of them, right? And so while you are in the circumstance that you're in, find ways to really show gratitude for what it is that you do have. And I know that might seem very glib. I'm not in any way saying that situations are not bad, situations are not dire and desperate. But what I am saying is that there is a blessing right now, currently, that you ought to have some gratitude about. Because the other thing that I really want to emphasize is that the grass is not always greener. When I moved into this apartment, I thought that all my problems in the world were solved. And this apartment came with its own set of dynamics and its own set of challenges. And so the grass is not always going to be greener. There's never going to be a perfect living situation. And just because God takes you away from one situation doesn't mean that you are not going to be met with challenges and things that you're going to have to overcome in the new situation. So if you are not finding ways to grapple with and have gratitude for the current circumstance, you're going to find yourself having these high expectations for the next move. And again, it's going to come with its own set of things that you're going to have to grapple with there as well. That being said, my peoples, this was my situation. It worked out for me in the way that it was meant to work out for me. All that to say that your situation might not look the exact same way that mine did, but understand that if you really do stick to those principles that I shared about remaining grateful, remaining humble, and keeping in mind that you can do your part in the carnal realm while God works his part out in the spiritual realm, then the overarching theme of this and why I really felt compared to share this story is that he is going to make a way for you. A lot of times we just think that our situation is never going to turn around. And so we become hopeless. We start focusing on all the negative and bad things about it. We become suffocated by, the elements of our five senses, what we can see, what we can hear, and all of those things. And God never gets a chance to do his work, but he will absolutely do his work in your life if you allow him room to do so. In Matthew 6, it says that he looks out for the birds and he looks out for the flowers. If he could do that for the animals and the plants that he gave us dominion over, how much more is he going to do for us? Sometimes we think that God has counted us out, but he's not counting you out. He wants to just test that you are tried and true when you say you have faith, and that you will not open your eyes while you're praying to just look around and see if anything has changed yet. If you would just remain on the course and believe that he's coming to your rescue. I decree it and I declare it today. So even though this situation was how it happened for me, and like I already highlighted why I believe it happened for me, examine your own circumstance, reflect on the things that you can potentially do to change the circumstance. And if there are things that are out of your control, please relinquish those and give those to God, because only he can change them anyway. Okay, so I thank you guys so much for watching. If you appreciated this video, if you appreciated the insight that I gave, if I gave you fresh new perspective, be sure to smash that like button down there, subscribe to my channel, and stay in the know for when I'm posting other videos like this, because we are here and we are here to stay this time. Mwah. Thank you guys so much. Peace.